Welcome to Digication Scholars Conversations. I'm your host, Kelly Driscoll. In this episode, you'll hear part one of my conversation with Gina Woodall, teaching professor in the School of Politics and Global Studies at Arizona State University, where she's also director for the Capital Scholars Internship Program, the lead faculty for the Early Start Program, and the director of Community Engagement. More links and information about today's conversation can be found on Digication's Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Full episodes of Digication Scholars Conversations can be found on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Welcome to Digication Scholars Conversations. I'm your host, Kelly Driscoll, and today I'm so excited to introduce Gina Woodall. Gina is a teaching professor at the School of Politics and Global Studies at Arizona State University. Gina is also the director for the Capital Scholars Internship Program, the lead faculty for SPGS's Early Start Program, and the director of Community Engagement for the School of Politics and Global Studies. Welcome, Gina.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Yes, I'm so excited to see you today and have this conversation. I have been able to enjoy viewing many of the internship e-portfolios created by students at ASU over the years, and finally found out who is behind some of the amazing work being created in that area and reached out to have you join me today. So I thought to kick some things off, it would be great for our listeners to learn a little bit about your background, how you came to ASU and got involved teaching there, and maybe when you specifically started doing the internship courses.
Sure. Yes. Thank you so much. My background's a little unusual in academia in that, I was actually an undergraduate student at Arizona State University and a graduate
Nice.
student, and I never
Nice.
I never left. I'm still in school,
Ah,
but my roles have definitely, thankfully, developed over time. So I graduated with my PhD in 2005, and then I think for about a year I had a baby. I had a baby right when I
mm-hmm.
graduated, and so I was juggling that, and also I was teaching part time. I was teaching a few
Mm-hmm.
classes, and then also doing
Mm-hmm.
some academic advising. This was before it was professionalized. Now it's professionalized with
Yeah.
professionals.
Yep.
But back in the early 2000s, it was not quite yet at ASU.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I was kind of doing that. And then I got offered a full time position here at Arizona State University, and it was kind of again a newer thing back then. It was a teaching track.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a little nervous about that because I had done research for so long, and I knew I could still do some research, but that the main thing I would be doing is teaching, and I love teaching. I was just a little worried about the research component, but
Mm-hmm.
all these years later, it turns out that I really really enjoy teaching and interacting with students, and I still get to do a little bit of research. And I think I started teaching the internship class. I think it was in '07, so
Okay.
2007, so not far after I started full time. And over time, it's developed. I think at first, prior to my taking it over, it was kind of more it was more a correspondence class, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So there was not a meeting time, even back then when students would all come together like in a traditional class and
Mm-hmm.
meet. It was more, I mean, I know that the person who had the role before me, he would mail, things would be in the mail, like a
Right.
correspondence class, right? Like
Yes.
mail in your paper in the snail mail,
Mm-hmm.
and then you would get it and you would grade it, that type of thing. And so obviously it's really changed, and it's changed in exciting ways. And Digication ePortfolios is one of the new technologies that we've used to make it better.
Yeah. So when were you introduced to Digication?
I think right when ASU got it.
Okay.
So I don't know if that wasn't 10 years ago? I don't remember
I
when.
feel like it's probably about 10 years. So
Okay,
you
I
were one of the first, faculty members, it sounds like, that had it under your wing and
yes,
helped it to
yes.
grow there.
Yeah, there was a faculty member, Richard Herrera. He was, I think he was the undergraduate, associate director of our school, and he called a few faculty into a meeting with the Digication person at ASU and said, "Hey, I want you guys to learn about this. I think it'd be a good idea to implement in some of your classes." And so I went, and then that was the first time, yeah, I was introduced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how has your use of Digication evolved since you first became aware of it and started incorporating it into your classes? Because I know for many
Yeah.
faculty members, it can be kind of an iterative experience as they
Mhm.
move from year to year and have different cohorts of students.
Yeah. So it really has evolved. I think when I first started using it, and I made it a requirement in my classes, students, there's resistant to change and they didn't know what it was. And it was kind of another piece of technology they had to learn. And so I think there were some growing pains at first. And I think at first I would just have students, just like picture of themselves and kind of like I make them keep like a weekly
Mhm.
reports within the class,
Mhm.
and so I said, well, just share your weekly reports about what you're doing in the class. So it was very basic. It was kind of like a bio picture of them, and then there was
Mhm.
like another tab, and then it was like their weekly reports, and then maybe their resume. And so
Mhm.
that was
Mhm.
it for a few, quite a few years actually. And then
Mhm.
after that, just looking at some of the other e-portfolios that are housed in ASU, I got other ideas. And I said, oh, okay, they could really, we could really make this better. And so, they could kind of bring in their just other things that they've learned, right? And
Yeah.
in the internship, and I kind of had them think big, right? You didn't just learn about your one political candidate, you're
Right.
working on the campaign. That's not the only thing you've learned. What are some other broad skills that you've learned that you can showcase? Because in the liberal arts field in which I am, liberal arts and sciences, it's difficult for students to get jobs. They
Mhm.
have to, they have to hustle and they have to put themselves out there more so than, for example, an engineering student or a
Right.
business student or
There's
a
not
teacher.
just a direct
Right.
path. Mhm.
And so I think this was one way. This is really when I started thinking about what's a way that they can showcase who they've kind of become
Yes.
professionally and how they've evolved so they could put a professional picture literally out there.
Yeah.
And then that's kind of what the idea is behind it now, is to give that link, put it on your business cards, put it on your
Mhm.
LinkedIn, make it public, um, and just really try to get them to put it out there.
That's great. And so I was curious how you might start that introduction for them and thinking about it as a tool that they can really use to share who they are and who that audience might be.
Yeah, I tell them, first of all, we're all obviously unique, different people, and you're a person beyond what you do professionally, right? Much
Mhm.
more than my job, as all of us are. So I encourage them to just have a simple bio page about who they are. What are your hobbies? What do you like to do? Some of them, they mention their family, which I think is just fine. I think that's great,
Mhm.
and it really showcases kind of who they are as a person and what they value. I do have some limitations. If you are at a stage in your life where all you're doing is going out and maybe having too much fun, you don't showcase that here. That's not what you do here, right? But really to kind of who are you? How would you introduce yourself to the world? And then beyond that, to then go into, this is also a part of me. I participated in this internship. These are the things that I learned. This is what I want to do moving forward. These are my skills, etc. So I really
Yeah.
want them to showcase who they are as whole people, and then kind of go into the specifics with what they've learned at the internship.
Yeah. And I was curious too, as part of their experience in the internship, if you've seen some students have some kind of pivotal moments where they may have realized that the direction that they want to go in may be different because of the experience that they had. Could you share some of that?
That happens all the time. Yes, that happens all the time. So many of our students were political science. So if you're a political science major,
Mhm.
you're in our school. They go in thinking law school, law school, law. They all want to be lawyers, right? All of
Mhm.
them. Fine, great. That's great. However, it's really awesome to witness. Some of them do become lawyers, right? So some of them they that's what they want to do, and they do it, and they're very
Mhm.
successful. But others, based on their experience, whether it's working in kind of as a policy analyst,
Mhm.
working on a campaign, working for city government, chamber of commerce, whatever, they decide that there is more out there than law school. There are other careers and positions you can take with a bachelor's degree, right?
Right.
That you could start making some money and you could start making an impact and growing your network, etc. So, I mean, I would say a good, and I think my colleagues would probably agree. I'd say a good 30%, 25 to 30% of people, maybe even more, that begin, their political science degree and think law school. I'd say a good 30%, 35% end up changing their minds. That, you know what,
Mhm.
maybe that's not for me right now. And it's usually based on the experience that they have at the internship. And I think the Digication helps them to reflect on that, because we're constantly kind of go, go, go. What's the next goal? What's the next,
Right.
constantly moving forward. But it's not very often that in a class, you're asked to kind of step back and reflect on what you've accomplished. What have you done?
Mhm.
What does that mean? Are your goals the same? Or do you have to adjust them? What's going on? And so the Digication really kind of forces them to do that, to take a breath, and then it gives them a picture, right, to look at, and a place where they can deposit all of the work that they've done, and then look and see what they've accomplished, and then maybe change their minds about what they want to do, which is probably the most exciting part of college.
Yeah, you get to see that transformation
Yeah.
happen. So, for some of the students that are coming into this, for many of them, I'm going to assume that reflecting on their experience, having that time to pause and look at their growth and maybe how their goals may be changing, maybe somewhat of a new process to them. Um, how are they being kind of mentored or instructed or getting guidance about that reflective process and how they may be sharing that within their e-portfolio?
Yeah, I think actually that is an area, I think where I can improve,
Mhm.
with the mentor, with the kind of one-on-one, with the Digication, with the
Mhm.
e-portfolio. I give, kind of an outline on the syllabus of this is what I want it to, this is what I want it to look like. You have a lot of options. I'll give them examples of others to view, and
Mhm.
I give feedback when I go to grade the different parts of the Digication. But I think that I don't do an amazing job, I'll say, of kind of the one-on-one, kind of deep mentorship with the Digication. I think that is somewhere where I could improve. Part of the problem is I just have a lot of students. I have
You
many
have a lot of
students.
students and a
I
lot
do.
of courses.
I do. And so I think that is because sometimes I mean, I'm being honest, I'll have students that will say, I don't really know what I'm doing, or I'm confused on this part, or I don't know what to do. And I'll try to, we'll hop on a call and I'll try to explain it. And sometimes they get it and sometimes they still don't understand. And then
Mhm.
that's when I say, okay, you need to email the Digication people. You have to email the Digication person and they'll help you. I
That's
I
right.
I can't really, I'm done here. I can't help you.
Yeah.
Sometimes students will come in my office if they're having a problem, and that's always
Yeah.
the best because it's face to face, and then we can I have their computer and I can help them. And it's
Yeah.
generally like a tech thing. It's not
Yeah.
generally the substantive part of it. The substantive part of it, I think that they do very well, right?
Yeah.
I think this generation is really good at reflecting. Way more. I'm a Gen Xer, so way more than my generation. We didn't
Mhm.
reflect on anything. At least
Yeah.
I didn't, not enough. And I think that this generation is just so much more in tune with working, doing experiencing something, and then seriously reflecting on, what does this mean? What do I want to, do next? How has this changed me? And
Mhm.
so they're quite good at it.
Good,
Yeah.
good. Yeah, and I can see that, there I think there's some wonderful examples that the students are able to refer to when they get started. Is there a I feel like I may have seen, is there a portfolio that's actually created by a fictitious student that is a bit of a model?
Yes. So ASU, are you talking about ASU's?
Yeah.
Yeah, so ASU has one. Kind of has a template, or I don't know which department or school, has
May
it.
have created it. Mhm.
But yeah, they did create one, and it's really good, right? I mean, it's of course
Mhm.
because it's fictitious. And but I do use it. I have used it in the past, or students have even found it. So sometimes I might use that as a template, and then I have my
Mhm.
own as well.
Yeah.
But students find that one out. And then it's funny because when they're just starting to get used to it, and it's an iterative process for the students. So like they're supposed to do a couple tabs, a couple sections, and then I
Mhm.
check, make sure they're doing it, and then they do more. And so when they're in that in between stage, it'll have like the picture of the fake student, and
Yeah.
then and I'm like, what? And then I'm like, wait, oh, they didn't do this part yet. Then I'll click on another tab, and it'll be the student and that I know, and the correct name and all that. But yeah, there are a lot of templates to choose from, actually. So
Yeah.
students have a lot of choice based on what they want to highlight.
Yeah, ASU's done a really good job at setting up a variety of different resources, I think, for both the faculty members and the students to utilize. And I,
Yes.
I thought that kind of fictitious student was an interesting approach. I don't see that everywhere.
Yeah.
Um, but the way that they did it is it's kind of amusing to read too.
Yeah.
It's formatted in a very serious way, but
Yes.
if you take time to kind of go through it and see how it's structured, it does give very good information about what one might include in different areas and the kind of content or stories that you might share about yourself. But because it's a fictitious student, there's some things that kind of um, are quite comical.
Yeah.
So I felt like for the audience of students there, it probably helps them as they're kind of going through and kind of approach things in both a serious but also somewhat lighthearted way, and
Yes.
how they're going to share who
Yeah.
they are, that I think is quite different from other tools that they might be using.
Yeah.
And I know that you've done work in other courses too around the use of social media. And I was just kind of curious how you might see the e-portfolio being something different from LinkedIn, for example, for the students to use. And I'm imagining they
Yeah.
have questions about that too.
Yeah, that's probably the question I get asked the most, like, "Why are we doing this when we have
Hmm.
LinkedIn?" Or,
Yeah.
"Why don't" LinkedIn is what everybody's using, and I say, "LinkedIn's great. Yeah, you should absolutely use LinkedIn." I said, "But this is" LinkedIn is, it's like the 30-second or 1-minute
Right.
kind of elevator pitch, right? It's like, okay, this is just high level information about people professionally, which is great. But the e-portfolio, I think, is kind of a different animal in that it really goes in depth about that person experienced and the work that they produced at the internship.
Mhm.
So at
Mhm.
the internship, what did you produce? You could give, if you get permission from the internship, of course, examples of policy position papers you've written. There are pictures of you kind of in action at the Capitol with your cohort of other interns, etc. There's other examples of your work if you put on events or helped put on events, which is really popular during campaign season, which is coming up, of course.
Mhm.
Pictures of the events, right? And again, they're getting permission to post these, and so it's more than just the LinkedIn kind of basic information. It's really lets the employer, really look and see what work you produced or what
Right.
your day to day was like. And I think that just gives more insight. That
Mhm.
gives more insight into the person.
Yeah. I kinda describe it as we're a lot more than the bullet points that we
Yes,
have on our resume.
exactly. Yes. Yep.
Yes. So,
Absolutely.
related to that, I know you've been a big supporter of experiential learning and the kind of importance for students to be able to have this opportunity to really be out in the field and having these kinds of real world experiences. And as part of your role, I'm imagining you're helping to make these connections for the students and where they're being placed for their internships. Could
Yeah.
you describe that process a little bit for our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I've kind of used kind of the longevity that I've been at ASU to
Hmm.
my students' advantage. I'd like to think.
Hmm.
So, connecting with others in the community, uh, uh, many of the people out in the community that I try to form partnerships with are former students. So
Hmm.
when you're, in a place long enough, then you see your students go on and succeed.
Yeah.
And if they had a good experience, they want to give back to the university. And one way to give back is to help students, get, again, just kind of go back and help lift other students up. And so we have amazing alumni at ASU in our school, and they bend over backwards for our students all the time. And so, connecting students with these, former students, with these with these community partners that who are very successful professionally is kind of an easy thing to do because they really
Hmm.
want to help. And the students, the alumni, they become critical mentors to our
Yeah.
students. So they're looking at the work that they're doing. They're signing off on, yes, you can add that to the Digication, or no, you can't do that, you got to do something else. And it's just, it's been an amazing experience, but it's not difficult when you have alumni who are kind of happy with their time, with their
Yeah.
experience in our school. And we have great successful alum that really want to come back and help students. So making those connections has not been very difficult.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
I know that that alumni connection can be hugely valuable, and it sounds like they are aware that the students are creating these e-portfolios as
Oh
part
yeah.
of the process. Do
Yes.
they ever see the results of them, or are they just kind of providing feedback on, yes, this is okay to share and this isn't? Do they
You
see them
know,
as they're building them?
yeah, well, they more and more, they do want to see the supervisors or employers,
Mhm.
do want to see the final outcome. So they'll wanna kinda sign off part by part, and then they do wanna see, I think to check to make sure everything's okay, but also to see what image is the student putting out there, how did we
Mhm.
do, that type of thing. And
Mhm.
and not every experience is a super amazing positive one, as we
Yeah.
know. Like
Yeah.
some jobs are not
Not a
awesome for
good
people,
fit.
and they
Yeah.
move on. And so when that happens, I do work well with the student, that's when I work more closely with the students. They're few and far between, luckily, those
Mhm.
type of experiences. When that
Mhm.
does happen, I work with the student to not disparage the
Yeah.
experience in
Yeah.
the e-portfolio. That's not what we wanna do, but to just try to highlight other, to really try to find the positive aspects of it and highlight
Mhm.
those aspects in the e-portfolio, because our job
Mhm.
is not to bash or disparage any place, in which the
Right.
student interned, but just to kind of, paint the picture a little bit differently. Um, and that's something that I do. Um, we did have a student this past summer, and she was actually an intern for the Supreme Court's public office, so kind of
Mm.
their press. And so there's a lot of rules, as you can imagine.
I imagine so. What a great
Lots.
opportunity too.
Yes, amazing opportunity. She was the only intern in the office, so I mean, she's
Oh,
a
wow.
fantastic student. And so, with hers, and they're a little bit behind, so she's kind of just getting started on hers, but
Mhm.
have to be very, very careful.
Yeah.
And they have to approve every step of the way. But I think with hers, what she's going to do, and we had discussed this, is just focus on, because all the opinions have come out, many of them in June. They start coming out in June, and they kind of
Mhm.
dwindle down by the end of the summer before the next session starts in October. But I said you can focus on, kind of what the press has discussed in terms of the opinions that have come out.
Yeah.
That's what you could focus on, because that's public, right? I mean,
Right.
the press is covering the opinions that have come out, and that's all public, and so you can kind of focus on that part of it. um, and she's like, yeah, that's something I can do, that's kind of public knowledge, and kind of looking at maybe different newspapers and the different angles, the different takes that they have on these really important, critical decisions that have come down, and kind of focus on that more,
Mhm.
because she is quite limited in what she can share.
Yeah. Well, what an extraordinary kind of learning experience to have too, because it sounds like they're not only learning about how they might be presenting themselves and, recognizing their own growth through these kinds of experiences, but also to be able to participate in that kind of critical thinking and about what is appropriate to share, and in what context and in what audiences. And I imagine that this is something that's just going to be such great information and experience from them to have as they take their next steps, whether they're going into politics or
Mhm.
other kinds of avenues. And it sounds like, with the background that I learned about you and looking at your own bio, that you have a wealth of information and experience to share in those areas because of the other kinds of research that you've done. And I know that this is not exactly on the topic of e-portfolios, but I'd love for you to share for our listeners too some of the research work that you do and other courses that you teach. Before we started
Yeah.
talking, I was looking at those, and some of those course topics sound really juicy, and I
Yeah.
wish that I could sign up to take some of them. So
Yeah.
I'd love for you to share with our listeners too some of that, because I think that that
Sure.
really informs the kind of mentorship that you are able to give the students. I know that you kind of modestly said that you don't do a whole lot of one-on-one on the specifics of things, but your background, and I'm sure through what you're providing through your courses, is providing more of that than you may realize. So if you could share
Yeah.
some of what you're doing with your research and other courses, I'd love to
Sure.
hear it.
Sure. Thanks. Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I started out, my research has kind of changed and evolved a little bit. I started out when I graduated in 2005, really focusing on women in politics, in
Mhm.
particular women senatorial candidates, so running for the U.S. Senate, and then looking at the intersection of gender and negative campaigning. And
Mhm.
so that's the research that I so just a little tiny part of politics. It's
Uh-huh.
so funny. It's so niche. But I started out there, and I really am really interested. I still am in women in leadership. It's
Yeah.
something that I'm very passionate about. I teach a class. It's a 400 level class called Women in
Mhm.
Politics. I just
Mhm.
got an email today. I made a friend in Maryland. She sits in the assembly there, thanks to my Capital Scholars program, and I want
Mhm.
her to zoom into my class. I like to get, again, that experiential kind of. I
Yeah.
want to get real world leaders to come
Yes.
and talk to my class. And so I'm talking to her person right now to try to find a date. But that's one of my favorite classes to teach. It is generally juniors and seniors. They all want to
Yeah.
be there. It's mainly women, but not all,
Mhm.
because of course,
Mhm. Mhm.
men want to know about women in politics too.
Yes, that's
Um,
good.
yeah, it's great. So that's an amazing class. I really kind of step back in that class and let the students kind of take over. And even though I think this semester I'll have about 55 in there right now, so it's kind of a little too big to do seminar style, but
Uh-huh.
I try to do that anyway and just kind of force them to really kind of take the reins. So
Yeah.
that's one of my favorite classes to teach. Another class that I developed, and it was, oh, I started developing it in 2016. Started thinking about it in 2015 with everything going on, and developed it in 2016. And I think it launched as a pilot in 2017. Is a fake news class.
Yeah.
So I think the title of the class is Fake News: How to Identify and Refute It. But really, what the class is about is misinformation and disinformation, right? And the
Mhm.
impact of that on our democracy, small d democracy, which we're still grappling with, right? It's not a
Mhm.
problem that is solved, especially
No.
with AI, and everything changing. It's actually going to become more insidious and more difficult to try and figure out what's real, what's the truth, and what's not. And
Mhm.
so, I developed a class like that to really kind of drill down and really get critical thinking when it comes to information, really kind of hone in on that with the students. And we do focus on, we start off with some philosophy, and then we really do focus, because it's my expertise. I'm an Americanist. I focus on American politics. We basically kind of focus on that. We talk about conspiracy theorists and kind of
Mhm.
how conspiracy theories develop and how they've been around since forever. And then we do I have, because you know misinformation is not just in the US, it's worldwide. Political leaders use it as a weapon of war, actually. So we do talk about it globally in some other countries as well. So that's a super important, I think, course
Yeah.
that we have. And then I teach American government, so I do teach 110. This is generally I love teaching this class. Not everybody does. I love teaching first year students. I really do. And it's American Gov. It's fun to teach. It's not, it's fun to teach, get them kind of pumped and excited about something that could be very depressing and confusing, right? Which is
Mhm.
kind of what's
Yeah.
going on politically, all the fighting and polarization, and it's ripping apart families and communities and all of that. So to
Yeah.
try and get them to see, yes, although it is not perfect, and we've historically have made a lot of mistakes, there is a lot of good and a lot
Yeah.
of progress that we've also have to accept and celebrate,
Mhm.
and then continue to become engaged citizens in our small d democracy. So that's always a lot of fun to teach as well. So I teach those classes, and the internship class. Um, so I have a formal program, Cap Scholars, which is a DC based program in the summer. And then throughout the academic year, it's political science internships. And that's kind of an ad hoc basis, meaning if you want
Mhm.
to intern for your local member of Congress, you can get credit for it, and you get into my class. And that's where the Digication part comes in.
Mhm.
My Capital Scholars do it as well. Or it's varied. I have students working all over the country, sometimes students out of the country that have interned. It's something to do with politics, policy, governance, broadly speaking. And then, and then we all kind of come together in this class. And I think students enjoy it also because they get to read about their peer, like what their peers are doing. It's like, wow, you're in
Mhm.
Spain, like working for domestic violence shelter.
Yeah,
Like,
I was
you
curious
know,
if with the internships, are most of them being placed, um, kind of locally around your campus in Arizona, or, it sounds like some are in DC, but you're doing things globally as well.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. We do get students that get State Department internships. Those are
Mhm.
always difficult to get, but our students do get them. And so they're often placed in different embassies around the world. And so those are fascinating. That's just fun to read about and listen to. And sometimes we hop on a Zoom and communicate that way. So it's great. There's a lot of flexibility in the class, and we have to be because we have students
Yeah,
everywhere.
all over.
But when students want to try to meet up synchronously, then I try to do that. You know.
This concludes part one of our conversation. To hear part two, be sure to subscribe to Digication Scholars Conversations on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Digication Scholars Conversations is brought to you by Digication, a technology platform powering the most innovative e-portfolio programs in K-12 and higher education. Our website can be found at digication.com. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please like, subscribe, and share with a friend. Thanks for tuning in.